Ladies and gentlemen, would you be so kind to take your places in the room? Mesdames, Messieurs, veuillez vous asseoir. Merci infiniment.
Excellences, Mesdames, Messieurs, chers participants, bienvenue à la cérémonie d'ouverture de la conférence internationale de l'UNESCO, Patrimoine culturel et paix, construire sur les 70 ans de la Convention de la Haye de l'UNESCO pour la protection des biens culturels en cas de conflit armé.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear participants, welcome to the opening ceremony of the UNESCO International Conference, Cultural Heritage and Peace, building on 70 years of the UNESCO Hague Convention for the protection of cultural property in the event of armed conflicts. Along with Anna Sidorenko, Head of Cultural Heritage Protection Treaties Unit at UNESCO and Master of Ceremony,
et conjointement avec Lucien Kleinian, conseiller au département de la politique de sécurité du ministère des Affaires étrangères du Royaume des Pays-Bas et maître de cérémonie,
we have the pleasure to welcome Mr. Ernesto Ottone, Assistant Director General for Culture of UNESCO, to the stage. Mr. Ottone.
Thank you so much. So good morning, Your Excellencies, Mr. Keizer Ollengren, Minister of Defense of the Kingdom of Netherlands, Mr. Jan van Zanen, he's not here, General, dear ambassadors, dear delegates, dear experts, dear friends. It is with a deep sense of privilege that we stand here today in The Hague to commemorate the anniversary of the 54 Hague Convention. Exactly 70 years ago, on the 14th May, this groundbreaking instrument was signed in the city synonymous to justice and peace. And these qualities continues to define the convention to this day. The UNESCO Hague Convention was born from the ashes of the First World War and the Second World War, a period that saw the systematic destruction of cultural properties, bombing of landmarks, and looting of objects that represent immeasurable value to people and their identities. Its creation was highly anticipated by the global community. The 54 issue of the emblematic UNESCO Courier magazine stated that an international code of protection of this kind has been considered necessary for a long time, and that, I quote, experience has shown that measures can be taken to restrict the damage, if planned well, in advance during peacetime. Thus came the first and most comprehensive multilateral treaty dedicated to the protection of cultural heritage in time of peace, during armed conflict and recovery. Ever since, this noble idea has taken root around the world, and we are proud to have played an instrumental role in raising awareness, providing guidelines, and accompanying states. UNESCO launched the list of cultural property under enhanced protection, which currently includes 55 sites. This grants the highest level of protection for heritage sites, calling on military forces to take maximum precautionary measures and granting extensive powers to judicial systems to prosecute crimes against cultural sites. UNESCO creates dedicated tool for troops in specific regional situations. During operations in Mali, military personnel were given a passport for heritage to ensure that they were aware of the significance of heritage sites and monuments. We have also actively pursued the use of new technologies for damage assessment and monitoring, in particular satellites. An online course for peacekeepers was developed, reaching close to 10,000 military personnel across all regions. We have also provided training to military officers from 19 countries, including 12 from Africa. Today, many countries have specific units for the recognition, protection, and documentation of cultural heritage within their armed forces. 7 decades on, the relevance of the Convention continues to increase. Today, multidimensional and protracted crises occupy the headlines, sadly, including conflicts with an immediate impact on culture, whether intentional or unintentional. This has resulted in accelerated ratification of the second protocol, counting 17 additional countries in the past 6 years. The consequences of climate change felt worldwide, like flooding and fires, further add to the importance of the Convention in the 21st century. This is because such destruction and disruption can present a collateral danger, such as the illicit trafficking of cultural properties. As unpredictability becomes the norm, we cannot overstate the importance of integrating culture in mitigation efforts. The global inquietude was clearly pronounced at the historic UNESCO Mondial Culte 2022 declaration, where we had more than 150 ministers of culture that recognized the increasing threats to culture. At the same time, 155 countries reaffirmed the protection and promotion of culture as an ethical imperative and access to culture as a human right. Despite the unprecedented odds, we have today a momentum to seize. Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, à travers de ces nombreux programmes et initiatives, l'UNESCO mobilise les États membres, les communautés locales, les experts et les citoyens du monde entier pour faire de la protection du patrimoine culturel une cause commune, au-delà des frontières et des différences. La diversité des profils dans cette salle est en soi un accomplissement démontrant le pluralisme de la culture et de ses acteurs. Ces 2 jours de conférence sont une occasion unique de créer un dialogue multipartite et de tirer de nos expériences individuelles et collectives les enseignements qui guideront nos actions de demain. Nous parlons du rôle du patrimoine culturel dans la consolidation de la paix, à l'importance du renforcement à des capacités militaires, en passant par les innovations et les collaborations dans les situations d'urgence. La collaboration et l'engagement de chacun est notre meilleur atout pour construire une paix durable. L'Alliance civico-militaire pour la protection des biens culturels, que j'ai annoncée hier, est une pierre angulaire de notre orientation future. Protéger la culture en tant qu'unité. Le travail effectué en temps de paix est sans doute essentiel. C'est en effet en temps de paix que des mesures peuvent être prises pour marquer clairement les biens sous protection renforcée, former les soldats et les civils et travailler avec le système juridique pour que les contrevenants rendent compte de leurs actes face à la justice. Pour conclure, je voudrais chaleureusement remercier encore une fois le Royaume des Pays-Bas pour tous les efforts exceptionnels et le soutien inconditionnel dans l'organisation de cet événement majeur et de nous recevoir dans cette ville remplie d'histoire. Le préambule de la Convention de 1954 dit, et je cite encore une fois, « Les atteintes portées aux biens culturels, à quelque peuple qu'ils appartiennent, constituent des atteintes au patrimoine culturel de l'humanité, étant donné que chaque peuple apporte sa contribution à la culture mondiale. » Aujourd'hui, en ce jour propice, rappelons-nous l'engagement que nous avons pris il y a près de 70 ans. Merci beaucoup et encore, je vous remercie pour que vous soyez là avec nous pour célébrer les 70 ans. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Mr. Ottone, for this powerful intervention. We now have the pleasure of welcoming General Onno Eigelsheim, Chief of Defense of the Netherlands, to deliver his opening remarks. General.
And thank you, Ernesto, for those very wise words and the opening here in the Netherlands of the 70th anniversary. And I think it's no time to waste. It's a good moment if you see what happens in the world with our cultural heritage, and that we still have a lot of work to do together to protect it as much as we can. So, dear friends, as a coincidence, I would have it, perhaps even today, the 14th of May, marks for the Netherlands a defining moment in our attitude to the Hague Convention. Because on the 14th of May 1940, the city of Rotterdam was bombed, an event that is embedded in the collective memory of us, the Dutch people. 771 people were killed, 18,000 people were left homeless, and the historic city center was demolished in its entirety. And it was only the medieval church, the Lawrence Church, that remained more or less upright, and up until today, it acts as a beacon of pride and hope. So this bombardment was a traumatic event, one which also illustrates that historical buildings are much more than just a collection of bricks. I myself am from a place in the southern of Netherlands, in the historical town of Breda, and I cannot bear to think about its striking landmark, Onze Lieve Vrouwen Church, suddenly disappearing in the field. As also clearly demonstrated by the way in which the Notre Dame fire affected people across the world. Cultural heritage stirs up emotions, and its protection is a moral and strategic necessity. Cultural heritage is a matter of identity and the connection between generations of the past, the present, and the future. So it serves as an anchor and teaches us lessons. And at the same time, cultural heritage is fragile. Not far from that spared Lawrence Church in Rotterdam, a building facade these days features one of the most famous lines of Dutch poetry. In bright neon letters, alles van waarde is weerloos. Everything of value is vulnerable. And this became painfully clear during the Second World War, when the realization dawned that the destruction of the cultural foundation of a country hampers its ability to rebuild. So the protection of the cultural heritage is closely linked to the protection of human lives and lasting peace. Owing in part of the bombardment of Rotterdam, the Netherlands was already making a dedicated effort to the protection of cultural heritage, even before signing the UNESCO Convention on the 14th of May 1954. The armed forces were involved from the start. The United States, as you all know, has its monuments men, who many of you may know thanks to the film by George Clooney. Our own monuments man was Colonel Dirk Graswinkel. He was not immortalized on the silver screen, but he did work closely with his American counterparts from late 1944 on. He was able to retrieve enormous amounts of archives and other cultural artifacts from Nazi Germany. Whether it is protection against the human appetite for destruction or against natural disasters, the armed forces are an indispensable partner in the protection of our cultural heritage. From emergency relief in humanitarian missions, reinforcing dikes during floods, to combating terrorist organizations such as ISIS, organizations that are actually targeting all forms of culture. The importance of this protective role of the armed forces is rather increasing than decreasing. The destruction of cultural heritage is these days a tried and tested means to achieve escalation and intimidation. And the effect is actually even more amplified by the speed and global reach of the social media. The protection of cultural heritage in turn actually contributes to stability and thus to peace and security. And that is why we continue to make an effort to include this form of protection in the mandate of our military missions. This was the case in our MINUSMA mission in Mali, and to this day it is part of the KFOR mission in Kosovo. The protection of cultural heritage is deeply embedded within our armed forces. We have a team up to 12 people permanently who are stationed in the section Cultural Affairs and Information who carry out this work every day. Every serviceman or woman preparing for deployment is taught how to take into account the particularities and sensitivities of a country on the basis of the Cultural Property Protection Handbook. This helps our military personnel to gain awareness not only of the ethical and legal importance of cultural heritage protection, but also of its strategic value. Having this knowledge could be the decisive factor for the success of the mission and for the safety of themselves. For example, Dutch military personnel are currently participating in a NATO mission in Iraq. They were taught about the cultural and political history of the country, but also about the specific differences and sensitivities between the Sunni and the Shia Muslims. For the purpose of maintaining stability in a mission area and for the security of our friendly forces, it is, for example, useful for the commander to know which mosques are of particular significance to the different religion subgroups. Military personnel play an important role in the protection of heritage. Only last month, representatives from the 83 countries that in 2022 declared their intention to reduce civilian harm during an armed conflict came together in Oslo. They discussed how to take this commitment further, such as restraint in, for instance, the use of unguided dumb bombs in densely populated areas. So we are making steps. And at the same time, there are limits to what we can do. Society demands a great deal of the relatively small number of people that serve within our armed forces. For instance, in the Netherlands, 18 million Dutch citizens rely on approximately 70,000 defense personnel to provide the peace and security that is so much needed. So it is therefore an important priority that we create a resilient society and involve society more closely in also ensuring our collective security. And the same applies from my perspective also to the protection of our cultural heritage. If a conflict threatens to erupt into violence, it will not be the military personnel who are placing sandbags at monuments or guarding our Rembrandt's night watch. Cultural heritage institutions like museums and archives have to prepare for such a scenario. For instance, by engaging the help of volunteers. And military personnel will then be able to fully focus on the possible combat, exactly as what we are seeing at this moment in Ukraine. So we really need to do this together. And it is with good reason that our Heritage Protection Unit is part of the Civil Military Interaction Command. And it is why they are making a dedicated effort to increase and expand their relations with other ministries and civil bodies. Our comprehensive approach becomes clearly visible during the civil military exercises we conduct with Belgium and German colleagues and network organization, the Blue Shield. And we also support international courses, such as recently the Cultural Property Protection and Peacekeeping course at the Peacekeeping Training Center in Ireland, and the Army Monuments Officers Training in the United States. The exhibition currently on show here at the World Forum, is also a joint venture with the Dutch UNESCO Commission. So everything of value is vulnerable, Lucebeth wrote. And I think that is true. And at the same time, I also believe that we can protect everything of value by forming a shield as society. By investing in readiness, networks, and international cooperation together with the armed forces. And that is what we are doing here today. And I hope you will use the next couple of days to exchange experiences and ideas, so that new connections are made. And actually, we just did it here on stage up front. And that will help us together to protect the cultural heritage. So in that way, we can reach out to each other and can together make even stronger stands for the preservation of everything that is of value. Thank you for listening.
Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, chers participants, nous avons maintenant le plaisir d'accueillir Mungayende, qui a spécialement conçu un poème pour cet événement.
When I think of heritage, I think of the Kinyarwanda word for more than one, ubwinshi. Ubwinshi is an indication of quantity, but it is more than that. It means both quantity and destination, like a deep well that you can sit in. On the edge of Lake Kivu, children like me are born in a state of ubwinshi. We are curious, rebellious, and because we are born at the water's edge, we see everything in life as fluid. The mythology around this lake considers that a witch kidnapped into the region by the royal court gave birth to that lake by orgasm. Thousands of years of volcanic activity have caused our birth water to be explosive. From the deep, fresh water of the lake, clouds of gas can suffocate livestock and people. I came to understand how expansive the world is in that water. My understanding was its own birth in 3x. First, screaming like amniotic fluid, then screeching like holy water, and later crying like the swell my family and I crossed to flee and start a new life. In these foreign homes, I found myself hiding under tables to hand draw portraits of grown-ups who visited home, our living room, to discuss grown-up things with each other, sticky things that I overheard but could not quite understand. So under those tables, I decided to instead capture their faces as side portraits. Looking at an auntie or an uncle in profile meant not seeing them for all that they really were, which made their horror stories less real too. Except for their eyes. Because the eyes always speak, even from the side. When I would crawl out from under the table and they would remember I was in the room, I would see their full expressions again, startled at my drawings. When I was a child, I believed in magic in an unbridled way. I saw magic in all things that I had no explanation for. Magic was why I could fly in my dreams, why a wound hurt less when my favorite auntie kissed it, why a chicken kept running when its head was cut for slaughter, why birds found their way home at the beginning of spring, why my parents escaped death through the eye of a needle in wartime. Wartime calls children to adulthood early. Words like luck and sin came and took the place of magic. Magical thinking became a false belief and imagining freedom a thing of superstition. Over the years, I've learned that the way people envision heritage is often influenced by this, the limitations people know from their past, especially if that past was one exposed to trauma. What is the Black experience outside of the white gaze? What is womanhood outside of sexism? Of being African and of Africa outside of imperial violence, neo-colonial heritage? These are questions about the future we must ask ourselves, even if the answers seem so distant at times. Trauma is not an identity, but we sometimes carry the weight of trauma for so long, we forget who we are outside of our suffering. Thinking of the future of heritage teaches us this, that heritage starts at the borders of our trauma. And what makes this mindset so challenging is that it demands of us and the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves to be post-revolutionary, sort of self-evidently free, which then poses the next question: who do we want to be when we finally get to freedom?
rejoignez-nous pour applaudir, que vous avez déjà fait, mon Gayende, pour ce poème très inspirant. La cérémonie d'ouverture se termine.
Indeed, the opening ceremony has come to a close. A side event organized by the Kingdom of the Netherlands in the margins of this UNESCO conference will now be held in this same room. We invite Ms. Davy van der Weert, Ambassador for International Cultural Cooperation from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Kingdom of the Netherlands, to introduce the event.
Good morning, dear Excellencies, dear friends. Very pleased to see all of you here today. My name is Davy van der Weert. I'm the Dutch Ambassador for Cultural Cooperation, and I'm very honored to be able to moderate this high-level panel for you today. It has come to our attention that our Minister of Defense is on her way, but she has asked us to already start because she is a little bit delayed and we're not sure how long it will take, a few minutes I think. But so I would like to let you know that she is going to arrive in a few minutes. So today, the 14th of May, is exactly 70 years ago that state parties of UNESCO agreed on the text of the Hague Convention. And it was, in fact, where we were yesterday at the Peace Palace. And I was quite impressed to see also the old photos, we still have them, of that moment when this convention was signed. And we were the host country at the time, and that is also why we are so pleased that we are able to commemorate with you these 70 years. And I would also like to thank you for showing us some moves yesterday night. That was really nice of you. And of course, today, in the coming days, I'm really looking forward to discussing all these different aspects of the conference, of the convention, with all these experts that are gathered here today. Because notwithstanding its age, the Hague Convention is more relevant than ever, which is of course a sad thing to realize, because on a daily basis, our cultural heritage around the world is violated, is destroyed in armed conflicts. Satellite and drone images have confirmed, for example, in Ukraine, and you are here, thank you for coming, monasteries, theaters, museums, churches, and libraries are damaged. And this is also the case in the Middle East, in Syria, Iraq, and Gaza. In Afghanistan, we have seen it, and of course also in Africa. And so, ladies and gentlemen, these attacks are so frequent that our work is extremely relevant. And I think it is timely to take stock of the steps that have been taken in these past 70 years, the lessons learned, and I was quite impressed also by our Chief of Defense, by all the concrete practices that you gave of how we are able to train our military, which is so necessary. And so this is why I'm very pleased that also several ministers here were able to join us. And I would like to start inviting the panelists to the stage, because we think we need to use the momentum of this conference, because I've also heard that some more countries are in fact intending to become party to the convention or to the second protocol. So hopefully we will be able to share that also with you. And so now, without further ado, let me introduce the panel members to you, but I would like to first ask them to come to the stage. Please. Thank you so much. So, from Sri Lanka, Mr. Vidura Wickramanayaka, a very warm welcome to you, Minister of Culture, country Sri Lanka. From Ukraine, Mrs. Irina Borovets, Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs. From Latvia, Mrs. Agnese Latse, Parliamentary Secretary for the Ministry of Culture. For NATO, Mrs. Arvine Fellin, NATO's Secretary General's Special Representative for Women, Peace and Security. And from the ICRC, Mr. Gilles Carbonnier, Vice President of the International Committee of the Red Cross. Thank you so much, all of you, for joining. And I would like to start with asking you, and maybe I can start with Sri Lanka. Could you inform us about what your country is already trying to do to protect cultural heritage, both in peacetime and also in preparations of crisis or conflicts?
Thank you very much for inviting us for this convention and to be a part of the panel. Devi, I think you have been to Sri Lanka. Yes. And you have experienced, some of the colleagues here also, they have experienced the conflict as well as the aftermath of the conflict. We had 30 years of conflict continuously. Some say that it is the terrorism that is. Of course, I don't want to define. There was a conflict. However, and during that conflict, twice, at two places, the World Heritage Sites were attacked. One with a truckload of bombs. But we have been very lucky. All those two heritage sites are still standing for us to see and to tell the story of our history and heritage. It is first what we should investigate is why there are conflicts. It could be armed or unarmed. There was a sort of a poster put up yesterday. That culture is target of conflict. Once there are conflicts, that culture is a target. Is it a mere target? After 70 years, during these 70 years, personally feel that the culture is the victim. So we have to revisit 1954. On one hand, that is at the international level, and at the national levels. Looking at the history, looking at the past, there should be more of regional cooperation. As a country who have been battered and shattered for 30 years, we are working on that, first at the national level. Crossing the borders of hearts and minds, not the infrastructure, not even the cultural monuments, but it's the humans that at the end of the day accounts for everything. So we have to cross that.
Yeah.
We have to take that extra mile.
Yeah. And
So
I think
we have been doing that as a country. In some endeavors, we have not been successful, but in others, we have been successful. Since 2009, there hasn't been conflicts, armed conflicts.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. And I think what you were mentioning about the regional cooperations is a very important notion that we can also discuss with the other panelists. Mrs. Borovest, if I may ask you, could you elaborate a little bit more? You are, of course, in the most horrible situation and being confronted with that on a day-to-day basis. Yeah, I would like to ask you, how are you being prepared?
I must say that a rare country in the world could be prepared for such a brutal aggression, its consequence as the Russian aggression in Ukraine. And really, neither the convention nor the protocol was designed in that way that any country of the world could be prepared enough. So, therefore, I'd better talk more about what we are doing right now, because as much as we were prepared, we were not prepared enough for such a kind of unexpected brutality. Now Ukraine is doing a lot in sheltering the cultural properties and cultural heritages, preserving, conserving, or restoring the damaged one, or tracking the stolen cultural property, dealing with the partners in order to track the stolen goods and to make or to create the legal way of returning it. Ministry of Culture is dealing with the policy making in that sense together with UNESCO, and we are very much grateful to UNESCO itself, but also to our partners country within the organization for making certain historical steps in amending the certain provision of the, for example, protocol for amendments for application of the protocol, second protocol. This is very important steps, even though that there are a lot of gaps that we need still to fill, and together with UNESCO and our partners, that concerns, for example, accountability of the aggressor for the war crimes, which actually, the destruction of the cultural heritage qualified as. So, but also accumulating resources, fundraising, because when you're at war, you need a lot of not only friends, but also financial resources to deal with the consequence of the war.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and I think it is so clear that you have had to deal with so many unexpected aspects of saving your heritage, and as well as the aspect of accountability. How can you also make sure that you gather all this evidence is of extreme importance? And then I also hear you say that we should also really look at the finances, which I think is also very true. So if I may give the floor to you, Mrs. Laatse. What about Latvia?
Thank you for having us here. And on this occasion of the 70th anniversary of the Hague Convention, this has given also us the chance in Latvia to really remind everyone of the importance of protection of cultural heritage. It is, of course, one very significant element of our cultural policy. It is at the core of our identity. It has been one of the core measures of resistance also during the Soviet occupation. And then today, with the geopolitical situation in the region, we are once again reminded of the importance of this. So what we've managed to do is to include and really emphasize this in the National Plan for Civil Protection. And by the end of this year, we're going to present an updated plan on the course of action involving all the stakeholders. And it is really a multi-sectoral working group that is developing this plan, and it has provided us the chance to remind everyone of the importance of protecting cultural heritage. In this same course of action, we also see Latvia joining the second protocol as one of the courses of action because it provides us with a chance to strengthen the cooperation with the defense sector and the national armed forces. We really also, during the development of this plan for protection of cultural heritage, we've really strengthened also the cooperation with the police and the rescue services, also in parallel with accepting and implementing the Nicosia Convention, for example, that is regarding the illegal movement of cultural goods. Our task at the moment is really to strengthen this culture of risk preparedness, to strengthen everyone's knowledge in the culture sector, of the knowledge of the tools that are available, and in other sectors to really raise awareness of the importance of the protection of cultural heritage.
Thanks a lot. And I think what you are mentioning, the importance of the different, let's say, actors involved, and also to make sure that they are working together is really crucial. So I might come back to you to hear a little bit more about that. And well, you know, we're so pleased actually to have you here, Irene, and I know that you've been working very hard on cultural property protection within NATO. Yeah, I'm really interested to hear from you. What would you consider a step forward in this regard?
Thank you very much. As an introduction, you might ask yourself why a special representative for women, peace and security is speaking on cultural property protection today. True. Just to clarify this aspect, the special representative also covers the portfolio of human security at NATO, which includes cultural property protection. But my title is already so long that we are trying to consider how to name, because the time that I introduce myself, the panel is already over. But basically, I represent the Secretary General, and I'm in charge of all the human-centric approach of peace and security at the Alliance. And the human security approach covers 5 areas, starting from protection of civilians, conflict-related sexual violence, combating trafficking against human beings, children armed conflict, and last but not least, cultural property protection. This is how we as an alliance understand the human environment when we have to go outside and be deployed. This is nothing new for the alliance, because if we look back at the North Atlantic Treaty, we are a value-based alliance, and the protection of cultural heritage is part of our founding treaty. And here I quote, we refer the document to the need to safeguard the freedom, common heritage, and civilization of our people. So when the alliance was founded in the aftermath of the Second World War, it was clear, and it was already mentioned in the introduction by the general, that the shock that the war brought on the impact of the cultural heritage was very evident to all of us. As an alliance, we are not part of the Hague Convention. We are not signatories, but all our allies are. So basically, it means that we are already. And during the years, our work and our understanding of the importance of cultural property protection has grown, starting from the experience on the ground. This is something that we are doing when we are deployed in an operation. This is an understanding that we have, and we are developing even more and more. And the case of Ukraine was yet another stress test for the alliance and for all of us collectively. And this is why we are also looking to how to institutionalize it better, and to understand what is the policy framework that we need. We already have documents. We have a military directive developed in 2019. And sometimes what we understand that we do things before having the framework, because when we operate and you are outside, you have to deal with the environment where you are deployed. But then, as we were discussing since the introduction, we need to look at problems, dynamic and challenges in peacetime to make sure that our armed forces, that our policy makers, decision makers are equipped with the right tools to be fit for the purpose and to be efficient once they are deployed.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that is very true. And I'm personally really optimistic about how NATO is planning to develop different aspects of this. So we might hear a little bit more of that from you later. Thank you so much. And we are really happy that also the ICRC is here with us today. Gilles Canonnier, welcome. And could you share with us that from the humanitarian perspective, how are you looking at the importance of cultural heritage protection in times of conflict?
Yes, well, good morning, everyone. And I think as the Dutch Chief of Defense just reminded us, and I think all my co-panelists, this 70th anniversary is really an opportunity, and I think we need to re-energize our collective efforts to bring better protection to cultural heritage, cultural property, which, as we heard many times, is much more than stones, but goes right to the heart of the identity, the culture, and sometimes even the sense of belonging of whole communities. And what we see with our 18,000 staff working on front lines is that it is indeed something that people and community cares about a lot. And when losses happen, this increases grievances that prevent the mending of relations in the transition from war to peace. So I think it's a global good for security and peace. Now, concretely to your question, what we have been doing as the International Committee of the Red Cross, but also with UNESCO, with Blue Shields, is manifold. First, we work all the way from encouraging states to ratify the convention and the 2 additional protocols, to assist them in with our legal services in implementing this into domestic legislation, but also into military doctrine and military training curricula. And then, as UNESCO has mentioned, as you are doing, we are engaging with armed forces and police forces all around the world with training programs on international humanitarian law. And first and foremost, under the Geneva Conventions and the additional protocol, cultural property is protected. These are civilian objects. These are not military targets and shouldn't be targeted. And of course, very importantly, the Hague Convention provides very specific protections. And then what we also do in the field is our delegates, when they see destruction or risk of destruction, which can be sometimes what we call collateral or intentional and deliberate. Then we immediately intervene with military commanders, with non-state armed groups, intervening to seek to protect or to redress any wrongdoing that has been done there. I must say that this is challenging today because, of course, with a lot of ongoing crises and limited means, the priorities for our delegates in the field today is protecting hospitals, access to healthcare, protecting essential services, electricity, water, wastewater treatment, and so forth. But we always try to say, well, of course, this is key for survival today, but actually it is also key to add and to always look at the protection of cultural property. So I think this conference is really an opportunity to re-energize, to focus on this priority, even if, of course, with the means we have, the first priority is always to save lives in emergencies.
Yeah, I can really understand. But what I find so important about the work that ICRC is doing is that you are everywhere on the ground. So you are, I can imagine, really also one of the first witnesses of things that are taking place. So thank you also for pointing out how you are working on that, and very interesting also what you mentioned with regard to the different trainings. I think that is really crucial. And I see our Minister of Defense coming in. A warm welcome to Kajsa. So, Kajsa, very welcome to the panel. And we have actually been discussing, what ways, what new policies do we think are important in this regard? How can we strengthen, furthermore, the links between the different actors in the field of cultural heritage protection in warm times. So I don't want to immediately ask you to take the floor, but if you're okay, then it would be wonderful if you could share your perspectives. We had a wonderful opening actually this morning, and great that you're here.
Thank you very much. And first of all, I have to apologize for being so late to all of you, and especially, of course, to the other panelists in this panel. And I'm sure that everything that has been said already has been very interesting and valuable. And I also really want to underline the importance of having this discussion, of putting this topic high on the agenda, because it is for many different organizations, but also for us in the Ministry of Defense, and I think our Chod has also underlined it. It is an integral part of our approach in conducting and also talking to partners about warfare. And for me, protecting cultural heritage is it's part of being civilized. And part of it's really part of humanity, and it's something that is often forgotten, I think, in the fog of war, and that is why we also must, from our perspective, ministries of defense and ministers of defense, be aware of the fact that we have a role to play. We cannot only look at UNESCO or at colleagues and ministers for culture or education or foreign affairs, the diplomats. Also, the military have a role to play, and that is why we have organized ourselves around this principle, making sure that people that are going on missions, for instance, in regions where there is war for peacekeeping, stability, or training purposes, make them aware of the fact that this is part of our policy, part of our policy to preserve this cultural heritage, as it is easily forgotten in the heat of the moment, and that by protecting cultural heritage, you are also protecting the people of the region, because it is part of their lives, of their culture, of their past, and it should also be part of their future. So once again, and I don't want to repeat, because I'm sure that many things have already been said, and I don't want to repeat what you've already heard, but that is why I appreciate having this opportunity, appreciate that everybody's come here to discuss this important topic, and that while the world is talking about many wars, unfortunately, today, a war raging in Ukraine, the war that is currently raging in Gaza, we often only afterwards talk about the cultural heritage. And I think what we should do is talk about it all the time, and especially how to prevent it.
Yeah, I very much agree. Thank you. And I think what is also interesting to notice that this conference is really also an effort of our Ministry of Defense, our Ministry of Culture, Education and Science, and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs together. And it's exactly because all these issues really come together if you look at the protection of heritage. So if I can come back to you, Minister Vikramanayaka, you mentioned that you would be interested in having more regional cooperation. Maybe you can elaborate a little bit more on what kinds of international collaboration you think would be useful. And you just mentioned, in fact, that we had seen each other in Sri Lanka, and I have great memories of my visit last December, and I was there to restitute different colonial objects that had been taken by the Netherlands at the time. And it was really also, I think, an important moment for our two countries to see how can we redo that injustice that took place in the past.
The restitution of artifacts. Let me begin with that. That itself shows crossing the boundaries and the goodwill gesture. But how many countries, after the Hague Convention, has the commitment for this restitution of artifacts? May I take this opportunity to honor and to appreciate the initiatives taken by the government of Netherlands on the restitution, because they have the commitment, not only just mere words, but also actions. And we have been the lucky recipients. Rather than going to raising our voices on these issues, we were able to have a cordial discussions and get it back. Some of the artifacts that were, pardon me for using this word, looted during the occupation of Sri Lanka. Well, that is just an icebreaker. How should we get into this? After 70 years, are we all happy, contented, the preserving of cultural heritage? Personally, I'm not. To be very frank and open with you all, I'm not happy. It may be at the international levels, it could be at the regional levels, or it could be at the national levels. There should be more teeth into this. We have ratified a lot of conventions, resolutions. What is the effect? All verbatim. We need action on the ground. We couldn't plant these ideas on the ground. I'm sorry to say this. So we should adopt a new mechanism, new modalities to implement and carry forward. And of course, the commitment takes a lot of weight. It was only 2 or 3 weeks ago that I learned that we have, as a country, we have not been signatory to the second protocol. Now we are working on that, and very soon we'll be a signatory to the second protocol.
That is wonderful news, huh? Thank you. Yeah, exactly.
Thank you. But we have to bring that into practice. So bringing that into practice, you can verge, urge, and merge. You have to have that. So how do we go about it? During the wars, one of the conditions, or one of the ambitions should be, okay, there could be a victor, fine. But what should be? We can say that, okay, we are protecting the culture, we are trying to preserve the cultural heritage, we are not preserving we are preserving the monuments, all that. So can't this be one of the objectives when you wage a war? Not to harm, not to...
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It should be.
Yeah.
I mean, it is in the conventions, of course.
It is in the convention, is it in practice?
Yeah.
That is what I mean.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Thank you.
So we are not practicing. So for that, at least can't we have a revisit? Let us look at on different angles.
Yeah.
So can't we have a conference or a symposium with the armed forces, chiefs of armed forces?
Well, we have one chief here. We can ask you to discuss this with your colleagues. Thank you. And
for them to have something similar to Hague Convention.
Yeah. Brussels for 3 days. Exactly. Yeah. Wonderful. Yeah. But then coming back to what you were also saying about the regional cooperation, I think it would be really interesting to look at these kind of initiatives also in the different regions that we are in. And I would like to also thank you actually for your announcement that you are going to work on adhering to the second protocol, which I think is great news. And I think you also mentioned a similar thing, Ms. Laatse. And maybe you can elaborate also a little bit more on what you were thinking would be a step forward if you look, for example, also into collaboration between different actors.
So currently, as I said, this initiative to join the second protocol, already for a couple of years, this cooperation between the Ministry of Interior's responsibility, like state rescue services, the police, and then also the defense sector, the National Armed Forces, there has been an intensification of dialogue, but there is still a lot of capacity that we have to develop, and we gladly learn from the great examples that are here. For example, in the Netherlands, I think the Ministry of Defense and the Armed Forces, they show a great example of how to engage this, and we appreciate the opportunity to learn in this context. But we have become more and more part of also civil protection exercises, and we try to also emphasize the importance of including protection of cultural heritage in the context of reactions in cases of military action, war, attacks, and these types of exercises where also with the presence of our allies in the region, there are ample opportunities to actually engage in such trainings.
Yeah.
And our role then as Ministry of Culture is to constantly emphasize the importance of protection of cultural heritage in the new plans of action that are being devised. But so far, I'd say that with each new instrument that appears, it gives us the opportunity to put this on the agenda yet again. And so acceding to the second protocol has given us, as the Ministry of Culture, the possibility to emphasize the importance of the cooperation between sectors.
Yeah, thank you. And again, also from our side, very pleased that you are here announcing your also adherence to the second protocol. I think that's great news. We have had the perspectives of the Ministers of Culture and Defense, but I would like to come back to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs perspective. So what would, for Ukraine, be a step forward if we're looking at how to protect cultural heritage in a time of war? And you are living this right now. So what would you like to share with us more?
I think that, first of all, there are a lot of steps that we could do in international and national levels, each country of the world. Because I think that, the Russian aggression against Ukraine is certainly a case study now for each country how to deal with the preservation and of the cultural heritage in the wartime, how to be prepared or how to deal with the consequences. So, I mean, I think that this now knowledge and this practice should be translated into some policy making, both at national level, but also within UNESCO, for example. So we understand that certain provisions of current the convention, the protocol, they're just not working in such a kind of unlawful wars.
Yeah, yeah.
So therefore, how to, for example, preserve the cultural heritage site if it's deliberately hit by ballistic missiles from the distance of, I don't know, 300 kilometers. I mean, the convention, neither the protocol, they do not prescribe that. And there are a lot of cases like that, or how to deal with the cultural heritage properties on the occupied territories when you don't have the access and you cannot monitor what is going on with this site, and you cannot react and deal with it, even with the help of the IRCRC or some other partners. Of course, there are some methods of monitoring, and UNESCO is helping us. You can actually use satellite connections and so on and so forth, but still, there are a lot of questions that need to be answered, and so it is a high time for us to translate or to translate all the knowledges that we have right now into policy making, to make it more up to date, to make it more operational and more maybe practical, because we still lack practical tools how to deal with it. But in terms of national level, the same with, by the way, with Latvia, we are now dealing with the improving our collaboration between Ministry of Culture, General Staff, and Ministry of Defense on training the militaries how to deal with the preservation of the cultural heritage. So there is an entire program for that, and I know that in a couple of weeks the training of such a unit, operational unit within the military forces of Ukraine will start with the help of UNESCO, by the way, and some other partners. So we are kind of learning the lessons and going in the mainstream kind of way of assuring that Ukraine does everything in order to secure the cultural heritage site. But also we need, that across the region, every country of the region or of the world should understand that something similar could happen, God forbid, but could happen to every country. Especially, I think that our neighboring country are on alert right now and learning our experience very intensively, unfortunately. I think that a lot of have been done already, but a lot still have to be done, both by Ukraine but also by our partners.
Yeah, thank you. And I think especially what you're mentioning also about the preparedness is something that, it has become so clear how important that is. And I would like to ask you, Mrs. Vellen, what would have the highest priority from your perspective, let's say, if you look at the things that still can be done to better protect monuments, and also we need to realize that, like you were also mentioning, that it is a kind of hybrid warfare. So, how do you counter those kind of practices?
Indeed, this is hybrid warfare. The time is passing. We are advancing our technologies but Ukraine is also showing that how we are going back in terms of how we fight. So Ukraine is really the case study of all the pieces coming together, from fighting on the front line in trenches or fighting with cyber attacks. And going back to what you said, and lessons learned and understanding both for you at a national level but also international and on a regional level, I always say that we as a regional organization, we are already learning, and we will learn a lot from Ukraine. And as part of that, one of my objectives is that this dimension, together with the other topic I cover, will be part of our lessons learned process. You might be aware that NATO is establishing a new center in Warsaw II as lessons learned from the war against Ukraine. And I think that that's a priority, that again, we make sure that the human-centric approach is part of this. Women, peace and security and those topics sometimes still too often, I would say, are left as a B plan. You know, we focus on hard security issues and we still consider that those issues are less relevant and they can come after. Of course, we save life. That's, as you said earlier, that's the main objective. But it's much more complex than that. And we need to be ready and prepare. And this is why from the current lessons learned, but also from the past and our current experience in Kosovo and in Afghanistan and Iraq, where we were deployed also to protect cultural heritage, it's important that we bring this as part of this multi-domain warfare, and that we especially try to anticipate the trends, and we look at the technology as both as a threat, but also as a resources. And this is, I think, where we can find solutions to be better prepared, because I think for NATO, preparedness is the key. Yeah. We educate, we train, and we exercise. As an alliance, we make sure that cultural property protection education is part of this process, part of the, as I said, training for all our armed forces, but also part of our scenarios when we exercise, to make sure that our armed forces will be able to protect our own, in case of an article, our own heritage and cultural properties, in case of our Article 5 attacks, but also support the host nations in evacuating and protecting the cultural properties. And we need to look into technology, also to map, also to look what you mentioned, what is relevant today, and it was not part of the convention, because we see that all documents and conventions and treaties adopted after the Second World War, they remain valid in terms of values, but the world has changed, so we have to adapt and adjust them accordingly.
Yeah, exactly. I see you nodding very vehemently. Would you like to come in on this?
No, just adding there, mapping is a very significant aspect of this, and actually one of the better examples of practice in Latvia is the National Heritage Board cooperating closely with the armed forces to actually create a list of priority sites to be protected and create scenarios for those. So the interdisciplinary cooperation for mapping in this context is extremely important.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, please.
Just to add that sometimes it helps to visualize things, because otherwise it's abstract.
Yeah,
it's about
thank
lists,
you.
it's about how
to...
and everybody in the Netherlands knows the story about the Second World War, and a very famous painting that is in the Rijksmuseum by Rembrandt, The Night Watch, and how it was saved from not being stolen. I don't think they wanted to destroy it, the Nazis, but they wanted to have it and to steal it. Everybody knows the story, and everybody can visualize it. And when you come in the Rijksmuseum and you see that huge painting, then you start thinking about how did they do this, etc.
Yeah.
And
I know that many people here in the room do not know.
No, so this is something that in our country is well known, and school children are told this story. And I know that today not many people have the opportunity to visit Ukraine, but one of the impressive things in Ukraine, if you come in Kiev or in Odessa or in other cities, is that cultural heritage is protected. So they're not only protecting military headquarters, etc., they're also protecting very visibly statues, monuments, etc. And why do we do these things? Because I think our first reflex is always to try to protect human beings. But I think deliberate destruction of cultural heritage is also it's an attempt to demoralize the country that you are attacking, the people in the country that you are attacking. So it's part of strategy. And I think we have to be aware of that. And by making this visible, by also showing, for instance, in Ukraine, but there are unfortunately many other countries in the world that have already experienced this type of deliberate destruction of cultural heritage, people understand better why it is so important. Why, while saving lives, while protecting your people, you also have to protect the identity of those people. And cultural heritage is part of that identity.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, thank you so much for elaborating on that. Gilles, you would like to come in on the ICRC perspective.
Yeah, I wanted just to come back on the inventory and the importance, but just to echo what you just said, Madam Minister. Indeed, we see that deliberate attacks on cultural heritage, including some of the sites with important religious significance or places of worship, are also part of a trend to dehumanize the other, and it should serve and serves as warning signals that really collectively states and the ICRC and others, we have to redouble efforts in terms of strengthening respect for the Hague Convention, but also for international humanitarian law writ large. And in terms of concrete action that can be taken, I think inventory and using technology to then register and have preventive measures is very important. It's incidental that this morning I received the WhatsApp of the president of the Red Cross of Costa Rica. And she was very proud because she said, oh, we just finished having blue shields on 12 major sites that must be protected under international humanitarian law in Costa Rica in case, and they have had celebrations which not only ministries and government, but also civil society took part into. So it's both a matter of pride, but it's also part of preventive measures that are being taken concretely by the national committees of international humanitarian law, even in countries at peace, but to not only to celebrate, but also to realize that these places must be protected. And maybe a last comment I would like to make on concrete measures we have been taking, in addition to what I referred to before. We do pre-deployment training for peacekeeping forces, and it's often the peacekeeping forces asking whether they want to integrate the Hague Convention and the protection of cultural property that makes, that shapes the type of training that our military advisors do provide. And it's important that states, as I said, keep insisting on this because with limited means, as I mentioned before, the priority is to save lives, to preserve essential vital services, to preserve access to healthcare, of course, but it's very important that collectively we maintain this focus as well on something which is, as you mentioned, it's a humanitarian imperative. It's part of protecting our common humanity.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Thank you. And you were also just mentioning the importance of continuing to work together with different organizations on this. And well, you announced, Mr. Ottone, also what UNESCO intends to do with regard to more military training. So would you like to reflect on how NATO and UNESCO can also cooperate together?
Cooperating with other actors for the alliance, it's key. We don't have internally the capacity to map, to develop the trainings, and so we really rely on the cooperation with the other partners, and we have already worked very closely with UNESCO, with Blue Shields. I mentioned at the beginning that this is part of our founding treaties and that we already developed a military directive in 2019. But following that directive, more documents and reflection have come. 2022 has been a key moment, not only because the full-scale invasion of Ukraine against Ukraine started, and this is what I said, it was an eye-opener for the alliance in many ways of the need to change our posture, on to integrate, to change our strategic thinking. And this brought together also a reflection on the importance of integrating human security across all the core tasks. So in Madrid at the summit, 2 documents were endorsed, a major one, the strategic concept, where the relevance of integrating, as I said, human security, including cultural property protection across the core task was included, but also the human security approach that gives the framework of this policy area. Since then, we have worked very closely with different experts and partners, briefing the committees inside on the work that it's done by UNESCO, but also at the national level. from different armed forces to see how we can rely on the different expertise, but also with a different organization on the field. I was myself in Kiev very impressed to see how the property is protected, and also work closely with, as I said, with ICRC, but also Blue Shield, and learning from their experience outside. This is why this is very important. Generally, we heard Alliance, and especially when it comes to my topics, working with the other actors is extremely important. We don't want to replicate what other organizations do. I mean, UNESCO has a mandate, NATO has a different one. What is important for us is to make sure that we fill the gap, that we as an alliance are ready to be deployed, that in our understanding of the human and security, of the security environment, the human environment is taken into consideration. So when I look at the way forward, now we are in a critical moment, I would say, for those topics. When I took up my mandate 2 years ago, as I told you, with this title and many portfolios under my remit, I understood that it was time to pause for a while and understand how the different policy areas under the human security approach had to be understood as part of the Alliance mandate, and especially in this moment of this very challenging moment. Yeah. So as NATO is changing its posture, is developing new defense regional plans, I think that it was time for us as well to understand how do we interpret this, who is responsible for what, both at political and military level. And this is why in this thinking, the cooperation with the other organization is extremely clear. So my objective is in 2 years' time to have a full spectrum of policy, of action plans, and then also doctrines to understand how really be ready to be deployed, and especially how to be interoperable. For me, this is key when we exercise with the others. For me, interoperability, it doesn't only apply to military means, but it applies to values, first of all, and it applies to our understanding of human security, cultural property protection, and I would like to include the gender perspective that applies to all of these areas.
Yeah. Thanks, thank you. And well, it sounds like there's a lot of work to do, and it's also very good that you're saying, well, I'm going to do this in this coming 2 years. And I think we are all here, and I would like to again thank you all for coming to assist in the thinking, actually, of how are the next 70 years of this convention going to look like, and what are things that we can do to still, be more effective. And if I can ask you, Minister Ollengren, about how do we collaborate within the Netherlands? You already mentioned a few things, but maybe you would like to elaborate a little bit more, because it's true that 70 years ago not all possibilities existed as we know now. So how are we dealing with these new situations that have arisen?
Well, I think yes, many things have already happened, and many things are being worked on. And what I already mentioned was especially the cooperation that you need. There is not one single responsible ministry or institution, so you need that collaboration. I would like to add, and that is national and international. I would like to add one thing, because we talked a lot about awareness and preventing this to happen. But what we also have done, and also I know NATO has been active in that also, is rebuilding and restoring, so afterwards. And I think that is also an important part of the message as an international communities, and as our individual countries, members of NATO and other countries, also can show by actually, from the military perspective, being part of that rebuilding and reconstruction. So the example in, for example, Afghanistan, of course now the Taliban is in charge, and we don't know what has happened, but while being there, working on stability and peace, also taking part in rebuilding, for instance, cultural heritage, or reconstructing a national museum, can be a very important, can send a very important message. And also there, you need to have the expertise. And our ministry and our military don't necessarily have that expertise, and they have to learn it. There it all comes together, collaborating with experts, collaborating with other departments, and making sure that our military, when they go out there, have the right access, at least, to the expertise that they need to do this. And I think that is, well, it's the only way to do it, in collaboration. And I would also like to add that it is not only something that is often forgotten in war, it's also often forgotten after the war, not seeing as a vital part of reconstruction. Also, they're focusing very much on rebuilding the country and the economy and etc. But as this is part of humanity and of identity, the identity of people, this must also be an integral part of reconstruction and rebuilding once the war is over.
I think you really rightly pointed out that the after-war reconstruction period is also a period where we really need to focus on how are we going to build back, how are we really going to look at those aspects. And I thought it was interesting, I think also, Minister Laatse, you mentioned there the importance also of communities. Would you like to elaborate a little bit on that?
First of all, during the Soviet occupation, many of our cultural heritage artifacts, tangible and intangible, were preserved in diasporic communities. So we very well are aware of the power of community in carrying our identity through even hard times. And then currently, what we are working on is to strengthen the role of memory institutions, libraries, museums, archives, in their community work and how they can engage local communities, newcomers, minorities in their work to explain the role of cultural heritage as part of our identity, to build new elements of cooperation, to build also future cultural heritage together. And so we are in the process of developing this program. It should be launched sometime in the summer, that the memory institutions will have a chance to apply for these cooperation projects. And the role of the non-governmental sector, like our museum association or library association, has been indispensable in building the capacity of memory institutions to be able to do this.
Thank you so much. I have received indications that we're coming to a close. I was just wondering if any of you would still like to come in, if there's certain points that you feel that you had wanted to say, but you have not had the occasion. Yes, Minister Wickramayaka?
What is the reason for the conflicts? Are we moving away from the ideals, human ideals? So how should we incorporate that into day-to-day life? We have, in many instances, I feel that we have failed in this. What prevails is lust, ego, anger, hatred. These are the... So we have to overcome this. How do we overcome this? That is been enshrined in all religions and faiths, to how to overcome this. I don't know, recently I saw a news item that closer to 20% of the European communities are becoming atheist. We're moving away from this. So Aristotle once said that if not for religion and law, the people could be worse than animals. So,
thank you.
So we have to harness these things. The human component, that is what is important. So once that take effect, I don't think there'll be any room for conflicts. There could be, because after all, we are all humans. Again. So best thing is to think about, revisit the Hague Convention. Let's adapt it in a way that which will be for the next 100 years.
Yeah, and if I hear you correctly, you're saying we have to need to put the human perspective at the center of that, and I think that is very true.
Very
so thank you, and I would like to give you also the floor to add.
Looking into the future, I think indeed, looking at how we can, protect cultural heritage from cyber threats will be ever more important. Yeah. We are working in different arena on issues related to reducing harm from cyber threat to civilians, but also to civilian objects, and I think this is part of it. At the level of the international movement of the Red Cross and Red Crescent, we are looking at the possibility of having a digital emblem that provide protection to the Red Cross or Red Crescent emblem for some of the target that shouldn't be targeted related to essential medical mission. And I think if we look 70 years ahead, this might certainly come to the fore as well with regard to potentially the Blue Shield and others. And maybe another aspect which struck me when I was hearing the Rwandan poetess is mobilizing art for humanity. I think this is very powerful. This speaks not only to the mind, but also to the heart. Yeah. And when it comes to the protection of cultural property, this is key.
Thank you. Thanks.
Yeah. A moment. I think that, the accountability for the war crimes, which is the destruction of the cultural heritage, is undeniably connected to the accountability for the crime of aggression. And I thank the Netherlands for taking such an active role in accountability of Russia in the full-scale aggression against Ukraine on many tracks, not only vis-a-vis cultural property, but for the crimes of aggression of the Russian leadership. And I think that it is very important for prevention of such an aggressive wars in the future.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think accountability is key. Yeah. Sorry, you wanted to come in as well?
I just want to thank you for convening us here and to celebrate this important occasion. Anniversary, they act as accelerators normally. We take stock and we try to see. We don't need to wait other 70 years. As I said, many things are happening today, and for us, as an alliance I said we pause to better reflect, but we are acting, and I want to take advantage of this momentum to also leverage on political will and leadership to continue to bring this at the center. So thank you to the Minister to reminding us that humanity is at the center. So we protect borders, but then we more protect individuals, the population, and everything that comes together with that. So I think that's the key. Thank you.
Thank you. Minister Ollengren, you still wanted to say last thing?
Only also to thank the panelists and to add to the point on accountability, that I think accountability is the other side of the coin of reconstruction and rebuilding.
Definitely.
And one cannot go without the other. So it's absolutely crucial. Yeah. And I want to thank the panelists, and it also shows, I think, we have Ministers of Culture, Foreign Affairs, Defense, and international organization, and thereby I think that represents everybody and every organization that we need in the next 70 years. But 70 years is a very long time, and I'm happy that it's high on the agenda now, because we all also need action now.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, and I would like to also really thank...
Just a minute.
One sentence, is it okay? Because otherwise, people, we're now in between the coffee and the last minutes of the panel. Please.
With your permission, taking just a minute. Since I was the first to speak on this panel, so let me have the last word.
You like to be the last, yeah.
Last
We don't mind. It's fine. Please.
Now, we have been talking a lot, and we will be deliberating more today and tomorrow.
Definitely.
Can't we? I don't know whether there is a peace museum.
A what? Sorry.
A peace museum. A museum for peace. No need to have a new building or new construction of the museums that we have. Let us devote part of that as a peace museum. The initiatives that we have taken for this peace.
Yeah.
And to prevent cultural damage to cultural heritage. If we can start on that. We'll start in Sri Lanka after this. Thank you.
Well, that is also wonderful news. Thank you. And of course, actually, a peace museum is also very central to the mandate of UNESCO. I would like to thank all of you for your attention. I think we really underlined the importance of looking at protecting cultural heritage at all stages. So let's be prepared, but also when the situation of a conflict is arising, we really need to focus on accountability, on protecting during times of conflict, but also in the aftermath, look at how to restructure, taking also the importance of local communities into account, and really look at accountability perspective as the other side of the coin, as you also so rightly mentioned. I would really like to thank our panelists for being here, and I would like to also thank Latvia and Sri Lanka for announcing that you're adhering to the second protocol. So many thanks, all of you, for being here. We do a quick photo.
Pom, 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 pom. Hello. Ladies and gentlemen, can I kindly ask you to take your seats again? Thank you. Mesdames, Messieurs, je vous prie de reprendre vos places dans la salle. Merci. Tu ne me joignais pas? Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear participants.
Yes, please. Yes.
The UNESCO International Conference, Cultural Heritage and Peace, building on 70 years of the Hague Convention for the Protection of Cultural Property in the Event of Armed Conflict, resumes with the first plenary session titled Peace Building Through Cultural Heritage and the Importance of Cultural Diplomacy. We are delighted to welcome Ms. Christa Pica, Secretary of the 1954 Hague Convention and its two protocols, and Director of Culture and Emergencies at UNESCO, to introduce and moderate this session. Ms. Pica will, with all panelists of this session, are invited to the podium. They actually have responded to that already. Thank you. Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, chers participants, la Conférence internationale de l'UNESCO, Patrimoine culturel et paix, construire sur 70 ans de la Convention de la Haye pour la protection des biens culturels en cas de conflit armé, reprend ses travaux avec sa première session plénière sur la consolidation de la paix par le biais du patrimoine culturel et l'importance de la diplomatie culturelle. Nous avons le plaisir d'accueillir Madame Christa Pica, secrétaire de la Convention de la Haye de 1954 et ses deux protocoles, et directrice de culture et situation d'urgence à l'UNESCO, pour introduire et conduire cette session. Madame Pica, vous avez la parole. Merci.
Merci beaucoup, Lucien. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good morning, still. It is an honor and a pleasure for me to moderate the first plenary session. And as it was already announced, the title of the plenary session is Peace Building Through Cultural Heritage and the Importance of Cultural Diplomacy. Before we start with our distinguished panel, I would like to say a few words, regardless of the fact that lots of course has already been said about the importance of culture as a foundation of our collective and individual identity and memory. It was also said that culture defines who we are, where we come from, and also shapes our future. And this is why, of course, culture is also one of the main pillars in UNESCO's work of building peace in the minds of men and women. That comes from the Constitution of UNESCO. We have developed a comprehensive set of normative instruments in the field of culture. One important convention, of which actually the first and the most comprehensive convention, is the 1954 Hague Convention for the Protection of Cultural Property in the Event of Armed Conflict, which was adopted in this very same city of The Hague, the city of peace and justice, as the mayor told us yesterday, in 1954, after the horrible destruction of the Second World War. It has also been noted that 70 years later, today, the convention is still of relevance, and because we see that there are still many threats to culture worldwide. We see deliberate destruction of culture. We see culture as being a collateral damage, acceleration of illicit trafficking of cultural property, the vulnerability of cultural institutions and art markets, the promotion of policies that aim at actually diminishing cultural diversity and promoting sectarian violence. So this use of culture as a source of financing also for terrorism, and the instrumentalization of cultural heritage as a weapon of war and as a weapon of terror is a reminder of the significance of the maintenance of international peace and security and culture's role in it. That's why UNESCO has been promoting the integration of culture in the humanitarian, stabilization and peace-building efforts at the global level. We have also developed some tools and documents, a couple of which I would like to mention. The first one is the Framework on Culture in City Reconstruction and Recovery, CURE, that UNESCO developed together with the World Bank. But also there is a recommendation on recovery and reconstruction of cultural heritage that was adopted in Warsaw in 2018. And these are the two frameworks that really recognize the importance of culture in recovery, but also the fact that culture is not only about cultural heritage and sites, but it's about the intangible aspects of culture, also our relationship with these sites. It's about artists and making sure that they can actually continue their work even in situations of armed conflict and crisis. We can say that we have made some progress at the international level. Earlier speakers have mentioned also the UN Security Council Resolution 2347 that recognizes the role of culture also as a source of stability and inclusion, and also as a driving force for reconciliation and resilience. And then, of course, there is this important declaration that was adopted by 150 countries, 135 ministers of culture in Mexico in 2022 at the Mondial Conference that also reaffirmed the imperative of protecting and promoting human rights and cultural diversity in view of the increasing threats to culture and the use for purposes which are likely to expose it to destruction or damage in the context of armed conflict. In addition, the Mondial Declaration also recognized the impact of multidimensional crises to humankind, such as armed conflicts and the effects of climate change, while highlighting the power of culture for sustainable development, peace, and stability, but also its irrefutable influence to foster international cooperation and dialogue. So this is a little bit the setting of the stage for the discussion of the panel today. We will have the opportunity to speak about the importance of cultural rights and the importance of maintaining diversity and celebrating diversity. We will also look at some concrete examples also related to UNESCO's work in Mosul, for instance, where UNESCO not only tried to rebuild back a city, but actually tried to revive the spirit of Mosul. And we'll hear more about what this spirit is. We also will be looking at examples from Bosnia, also other parts of the world, Mali, and then also to look at the framework of UNESCO's normative instruments and how this actually can help us, first to promote cultural diplomacy, but also to protect culture better in situations of emergencies. And again, we want to emphasize that culture matters before, during, and after armed conflict and crisis. So please welcome the distinguished panelists. And I will start by introducing Mrs. Alexandra Xantaki, who is the United Nations Special Rapporteur in the field of cultural rights. She has published on topics varying from cultural rights of minorities and indigenous peoples to cultural diversity, cultural heritage, balancing cultural rights with other rights and interests, and multicultural aspects of international human rights law. We have, the Secretariat of the 1954 Convention has actually invited Alexandra also to engage with the member states of the Hague Convention, and I'm very happy that we have now this regular dialogue so that we don't forget about the importance of cultural rights also when discussing the Hague Convention. To her right is Miss Katariina Leinonen, who is the head of European External Action Service, EAS, Division of Integrated Approach to Peace and Security. And it will be interesting to hear more about this integrated approach and whether culture actually is also integrated in this approach. Then to the right of Katariina is Mr. El Bukhari Ben Essayuti, who is the head of Timbuktu Cultural Mission, who was appointed in 2013 to rebuild the buildings vandalized by armed Islamists. And he's also currently the Vice President of African Sites Managers Network. Welcome to you. Ms. Amra Hadzimuhamedovic is the Director of the Center for Cultural Heritage of International Forum Bosnia, who has managed diverse projects of integrating cultural heritage into post-war recovery in Bosnia, as well as Kosovo, Palestine, and Iraq. She has also worked with international organizations and has founded the House of International Dialogue and Research, which includes the International Summer School Youth and Heritage. Ms. Deborah K. Palmer, to the right there, is the Director of the World Heritage and Cultural Conventions at the Jamaican Ministry of Culture, Gender, and Entertainment and Sport. She is playing a key role in the implementation of Jamaica's obligations under UNESCO's various culture conventions, and it will be very insightful to hear from her experience in Jamaica, but also in the Caribbean context, on how we can actually use these instruments to promote the cultural heritage protection. And last but not least, Mr. Omar Mohammed, who is the founder of Mosul Eye, through which he informed the world about life under the Islamic State of his city. Now, Mr. Mohammed is a promoter of social initiatives for the people of Mosul, including the international effort to resupply the Central Library of the University of Mosul. Mr. Mohammed was named in 2013 the Research of the Year by Iraq's Ministry of Higher Education and Scientific Research, and is now Professor of Cultural Heritage of Sciences Po University in Paris. So please give them a round of applause. Thank you very much. And I would now like to start actually with Alexander, with the UN Special Rapporteur, because one of your main roles is to study the relationship between cultural rights and cultural diversity, with the aim, of course, to promote the cultural rights. So I would want to invite you to elaborate more on why is it important to consider cultural rights in situations of armed conflict? Can we not somehow put them aside in emergencies? And also, if you can elaborate on why, or rather, what is the role of cultural diplomacy and the soft power of culture in promoting cultural rights and cultural diversity in armed conflicts and emergencies? Over to you.
Thank you very much, Krista, and good morning, everyone. I think that we've heard yesterday and earlier today, and from Krista as well, very important and passionate messages told in much more, much nicer ways than I would say of the importance of cultural heritage for the identity, for the psyche of each one of us, but also as groups of individuals. And I think that what these messages say is that we do not want to protect the buildings as such, maybe only. We do not want to protect the mosaics as, as such, but we really want to protect the deep connection that exists between these buildings, practices, and objects to the individuals and the groups. And so this means that the core of the protection cannot only be the building and the practice. The core of the protection has to be the individual and the group. So the individual and the group have the right to these connections, to these deep connections, the right to enjoy them, to have access to them, and to participate in the decisions about them. And these are cultural rights. But even beyond that, I think that it is important not to come out of this conference with the understanding that we're talking about states' rights. The United Nations talks about the right of everyone to one's culture, so it is about individual and groups' rights. It's about human rights. And I think that this is why it is very important to talk about the protection of cultural heritage together with the protection of the human right to cultural heritage, in order to give the right meaning that we are not only talking about state rights. And finally, I think that it is important to recognize that these rights, cultural rights, are, contrary maybe to other rights, are at stake not just at the beginning of the war, but before the war. If anything, very often they act as precursors to the ethnic conflict. And we have seen that, and we see that every day, the dehumanization of individuals and groups, and how we talk about the cultures of individual and whole groups, the disinformation and misinformation about the values and philosophies of groups. And also the distortion of histories and, taking one event of the group's history and making it into a central point. I have very personal experience of that. I am Greek, and the great idea of each and one nation of the Balkans means that in the past we have engaged in aggression. Only in the past? We have engaged in aggression because of this maybe lack of a wider understanding of our history. And this is, again, cultural rights. So this is, I think, very important when we talk about cultural property. And I also want to address the cultural diplomacy. My role in the United Nations, my mandate is very much based on this soft way of convincing states that they should implement cultural rights. So there is no doubt that I believe that the international relations of cultural heritage and cultural rights are extremely important ways of evolving the well-being of individuals and groups. However, let's be very careful. We are not talking about good practice, we are not talking about aspirations, and we are not talking about ethical considerations. We are talking about legal obligations that the states, each one of the states that is represented here today and outside this building, have undertaken by their own decision to respect the right of everyone within their territory to their cultural heritage. And I think this is my worry, that when we talk about cultural diplomacy, a very important concept and a very important and long-established practice in UNESCO and in UN and elsewhere about protecting the right cultural rights and the right to cultural heritage, we give the impression that we're talking about soft law. We are talking about very much about hard international law that has to be implemented. And finally, I also worry that cultural diplomacy maybe is a little bit too mellow at times, and we shun away from realities that have to be spoken loudly and clearly. Cultural genocide in every part of the world. In Ukraine, absolutely, and I've made a lot of statements about this, but also in Gaza, and also in the other 27, I think, places in the world at the moment that have ethnic conflicts. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alexandra, for these rather sobering words. I would like to continue with Amra, because you have also worked a lot on issues related to cultural heritage destruction and cultural memory, and how this is related to human rights. Could you elaborate on that?
hope this works, yes. Thank you very much, Krista, for this question, and thank you very much for this wonderful introduction. So this morning, some of the speakers were mentioning the destruction of cultural heritage serves to, as a tool of demoralization of the people, of those who are, in fact, who associate themselves with that cultural heritage that is a subject of destruction. However, our experience in Bosnia and my experience across the world, wherever I was working and wherever intentional destruction of cultural heritage was taking place, is that in fact that destruction is a tool of dehumanization of the people. And some kind of attachment to cultural heritage, once when it is under the risk to be destroyed or destroyed, a strong attachment of the victims of ethnic cleansing, genocide, in fact, is a defense tool and a survival tool. So let me use some vignettes from Bosnia, where around 3,000 heritage places, I'm trying to, and I don't know why this does not work. Okay. Very around, I have some photos and some vignettes, just to build upon what you said as some kind of a introduction or theory. So around 3,000 heritage sites, heritage places were systematically destroyed in Bosnia. And there even debris were removed from the sites and dumped away. And if you look at this photo of the Mehmet Paša Kukavica Mosque in Foča, it is considered as the only surviving mosque at the territory occupied, that was occupied by the Serbian forces. So this kind of destruction, I don't know, okay. It goes, it does not, I'm so sorry if I... No, it's worked. No. To understand which mental harm this destruction inflicts to people, like the one in Yemen and across the world, the people that live in the ruins, that live this heritage, there are a lot of quotes from the people who are testifying the destruction of cultural heritage for them was even more painful than the loss of their closest relatives. I quote Bogdan Bogdanovic, a very famous professor from Belgrade, who reacted to the destruction of Old Bridge in Mostar. He said, I ask myself how the people of Mostar will live without that bridge. They have now lost a part of their being. With a loss like this, people lose their place in time. Dealing with voids and absences after destruction of heritage is yet another resilience impulse. I don't know if someone can help me with this. Okay. So these voids and absences, once when the heritage places were in fact destroyed and cleansed of both people and the buildings and manuscripts and all the objects that people were associating value to, there is a certain phenomenon that has been developed as some kind of resilience tool, a phenomenon of phantom limb. What I have realized that heritage place persists in mental maps, in minds of people who in fact lost it physically. And empty sites are never, for them, a void. They are simply church or a mosque, a center of their world. Like at this photo, where 24 years after destruction of Al-Ajah Mosque, where, everything was dumped into the different kind of dumping sites, and it was totally empty site, people are still performing ritual praying and calling the site mosque. The systematic violations of both women and houses were one of the major manifestations of the nationalist programs and their associated virulent masculinity. We should not gloss over the fact that insistence on valorizing monumental sites, which are expression of a dominance, either of religious dominance or the authorities, different kind of palatial sites, sacred sites, are in fact, and insisting on their significance, even at the World Heritage List, but also at the national list, and prioritizing them during the reconstruction entail a preference for the male domain, and in fact avoids democratic approach. So it neglects the female processing of trauma, which is usually in these affected communities a private domain, a house. And it is a form of willful ignorance of social and cultural specificities in these societies. So vernacular heritage that is not listed, that does not any kind of special protection, becomes, during these destructions, even more important for the communities that are affected than those monumental sites. This Palestinian woman from village Suba, as millions of people across the world, suffer nostalgia and homelessness, despite the fact that she personally never lived in the house from which her grandparents were expelled. It is the only home for her. The visiting of the homes as a form of pilgrimage have become a trauma processing heritage practice for Palestinians and for the heritage community. The nexus between heritage destruction and people comes to its fullness in the places of pain. At this photo, you can see one of the important examples from the recent past. It includes the Mehmet Pasha Sokolovic Bridge, a World Heritage Site in Visegrad, Bosnia, where the mass torture and extraordinarily brutal mass killing of more than 1,000 people took place in 1992. And the other example that I'm presenting here out of a lot of them is Al-Sar Church in Mosul, where the ropes at the windows still testify execution by hanging in the hall that you can see at this image, which has been restored as a part of the UNESCO Reviving Spirit of Mosul project.
Thank you, Amra.
I will just conclude with a story of Serbian journalists. Sorry, I can stop here, but there is a good story of a Serbian journalist and two Croatian sculptors who, in fact, when 16 mosques in Banja Luka were destroyed, risked their lives, although being Christians, let's say, to save the fragments, to take them out from Banja Luka that was occupied at that time, to Croatia, then to Germany, and they were carrying their mosque with themselves to be and protecting these fragments in order to enable their reusing during the reconstruction that took place in Banja Luka.
Thank you so much, Amra. Thanks for sharing these powerful images. It really brings a message home. Let me now move to Katarina and to the European Union. So you head the unit that is called Integrated Approach to Peace and Security, or the European External Action Service. Could you elaborate a little bit on what it is and where is culture in all of that?
Thank you, Krista. this is on and everybody can hear
Yes.
me loud and clear. Good.
Yes.
Very honored to be here this morning representing the European Union External Action Service. We are located in the Managing Directorate of Peace, Partnerships and Crisis Management. And in my division, we have, let's say, the leadership of a number of important concepts for the effective implementation of the European Common Foreign and Security Policy. Out of this, obviously, the cultural heritage concept, which dates from 2021. It is quite recent, thinking about the age of the European Union, which was obviously born already a long time ago. The cultural heritage concept was followed in 2021 by conclusions of the European Union Council, where the EU member states declared the importance of the protection, preservation of cultural heritage as integral part of the European Union's foreign policy. This is, I think, where its strength comes from, a bit like the convention, Krista and Alexandra, as you said, where states independently and out of their free will declare and commit to this important issue. Obviously, I would say that the European Union is extremely not only well placed, but also has the obligation to work very actively on cultural heritage. We are inherently a peace project ourselves, granted with Nobel Peace Prize. As have been mentioned here, we have a bitter experience from our continent from destruction of cultural heritage. And also we have, at the moment, countries waiting to be integrated to the European Union, such as Ukraine, that are facing today, while we are talking, destruction of their cultural heritage. What do we mean by integrated approach? Well, basically, if you look at the European Union's toolbox in external relations, it has developed over the past years tremendously. We have, without going into great lengths, developed very much under the pressure of the current situation with the invasion by Russia of Ukraine, a lot of our security and defense capacity. We have, for example, under the Common Security and Defense Policy today, 24 military or civilian crisis management missions. We have created a European peace facility to support partner countries, but we also have reinforced our capacity in the fields of cyber security, hybrid, maritime security, and space, and so forward. But not only in defense and security, also in peace building, where we have developed our capacity in peace mediation. And here I would like to make the link also to the protection of cultural heritage, because we really have realized how powerful of a vector cultural heritage can be in peace mediation, and also for opening those doors in a lot of countries where access today is difficult, either due to geographic reasons, active conflicts, or political reasons. So for us, the integrated approach means that we take all the tools, all the toolbox of the European Union and use it smartly and as efficiently as possible, for example, for the protection of cultural heritage. There are a lot of examples of, in particular, civilian crisis management missions where we work actively on cultural heritage, for example, in Iraq, Armenia, Ukraine, and others. and in many situations in partnership with UNESCO and also with civil society, because integrated approach is also about working as partners with international organizations and local organizations, for example in Mali, where the European Union has also supported the work that we are going to hear about. I will stop here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Katarina. You mentioned also Iraq, and I would like to actually turn now to Omar to speak about the what is actually one of UNESCO's flagship projects, the initiative to revive the spirit of Mosul that our Director General launched in 2018 after the 3-year occupation by ISIL and the liberation of this iconic multicultural city. If I may put it very directly to you, Omar, what is this spirit of Mosul that we needed to revive?
Well, thank you, Krista. To put it simply, you have a city that is a melting pot of diverse civilizations and cultures, ethnicities, and people used to live in harmony. And all of a sudden, an extremist group comes to the city and starts systematically destroying that cultural heritage that kept the people living together for centuries. And all of a sudden, it's now day zero in history. That extremist group, ISIS, saying, this is day zero, whatever is in the past no longer matters, history starts with us. After the liberation, the people were left in a shock, not knowing what to do the next day. Should we start rebuilding our homes? Should we start returning home? There was no answer to that complicated question. And what happened is that the answer was literally in the cultural heritage of the city. Let's start with rebuilding a mosque, a church, a synagogue, and a museum. That's what we need to bring the people back together. But it's also to rehabilitate that diminished and destroyed social structure that lived for centuries, but in just a few years, it was destroyed by an extremist group. The people needed hope, and hope was actually presented in the reconstruction of the most important landmarks of the city. For example, a Nuri mosque, around which centuries ago the entirety of the social system, socio-political system of the city was created, where you have people living together. And this was also presented during the phase of the reconstruction when UNESCO presented, not saying we are going to rebuild the cultural heritage of the city, which might refer to only the physical structure, but UNESCO said, let's revive the spirit of Mosul, which is exactly what the city needed to rehabilitate the trauma that was left. And probably to keep my intervention, Krista, short, to give a concrete example of how the spirit of Mosul functioned actually in reality, is that probably many of you have heard that ISIS once, from inside Mosul, promised to invade Rome and to occupy the Vatican. But we have seen, as a result of the reconstruction and revive the spirit of Mosul, the Bishop of Rome himself, Pope Francis, arrived in Mosul and brought around him Muslims and Christians and other communities together and called for peace from inside the city. And that's actually the spirit of Mosul, is that peace will always prevail when we care about the people and when we care about why cultural heritage matters to them and how we can bring cultural heritage back to its original function. And it was perfectly put yesterday, I believe, when they said cultural heritage is the only thing that connects the dead, the living, and the unborn. And that is exactly the story of Revive the Spirit of Mosul.
Thank you, Omar. El Bukhari, we have a similar experience in Mali. Could you, from your experience, tell us how do you feel the reconstruction of mausoleums actually contributed to the healing of the communities? Over to you.
Merci, Katrina. Et je dois dire que l'expérience vécue à Tombouctou, ça a été une expérience enrichissante. Ça a été quelque chose d'unique, ça a été quelque chose d'inédit. En sens que les destructions menées à Tombouctou par les groupes armés, contrairement à ce qui s'est passé en Afghanistan ou en Bosnie, ce n'est pas des confessions différentes. Donc à Tombouctou, c'est des musulmans, quelquefois même des fils de la ville de Tombouctou qui sont venus détruire le patrimoine de la ville, des gens de même confession pour des motifs inavoués. Alors l'esprit de la reconstruction pilotée par l'UNESCO en collaboration avec le ministère de la Culture du Mali, c'était de pouvoir faire en sorte que toutes les communautés soient impliquées. Donc toutes les communautés soient impliquées pour qu'ils puissent avoir une sorte de résilience économique, c'est-à-dire faire de la reconstruction du patrimoine culturel une sorte de résilience économique, parce que le Mali, de façon générale, et surtout les régions du Nord et Tombouctou, c'est vraiment des entités très pauvres, mais très riches de leur culture. Tombouctou, comme Omar l'a dit de Mossoul, Tombouctou aussi, c'est un melting pot. Donc, Tombouctou, tout au long de l'histoire, se sont rencontrés non seulement des populations de groupes communautaires différents, de confessions différentes. Donc on a eu des chrétiens, on a eu des juifs, on a eu des musulmans de différentes, qui appartiennent à différents dogmes qui se sont rencontrés. Donc la destruction du patrimoine culturel de Tombouctou, ça a été un traumatisme profond. Exactement comme l'a dit ma collègue qui a parlé de la Bosnie. Personne n'imaginait qu'à Tombouctou, qu'on puisse s'en prendre à des mosquées et à des mausolées. C'est un sacrilège innommable. Donc, à l'orée de la reconstruction, il fallait donc profiter. Donc, il fallait faire un programme de reconstruction qui puisse permettre aussi de recoudre le tissu social qui a été très, très dégradé par donc, ces destructions. Donc la reconstruction a permis de faire en sorte que tous les fils de la ville, toutes les entités, notamment donc les religieux, les artisans, la corporation des maçons, donc l'administration publique, les collectivités, les politiques, puissent se retrouver ensemble, et c'est ce qui s'est passé. Donc c'est une reconstruction à hauteur de, c'est-à-dire le coût moral, le coût social dépasse de beaucoup donc le coût financier. Donc on a mis ensemble les fils du pays, la ville, on s'est rencontrés, on a donc échangé avec les anciens, et on s'est mis d'accord sur des canevas de reconstruction de ce patrimoine-là. Donc c'est la reconstruction du patrimoine bâti, du patrimoine physique, c'est aussi la reconstruction des esprits. Il fallait exorciser des têtes le traumatisme, il fallait exorciser les têtes, tout ce traumatisme, toute cette tendance donc au djihadisme. Il fallait faire des discours de contre-narration pour que ce qui s'est passé ne puisse plus jamais se reproduire. Donc la construction, à partir de là, il y a ce qu'on a fait. physique, on a essayé de reconstruire à l'identique les mosquées, les mausolées et même les manuscrits qui ont été donc brûlés ou emportés. Mais il y a eu plusieurs rencontres, il y a eu plusieurs discussions. Donc le projet de reconstruction a pénétré le fin fond des arcanes de la société tombokienne et ça a permis non seulement de rapprocher ces communautés entre elles, mais aussi de rapprocher encore plus ces communautés de la notion de patrimoine mondial. Donc pourquoi, qu'est-ce qui s'est passé? Comme je l'ai dit au début, Tombouctou, ce qui a été douloureux, c'est que c'est d'autres musulmans qui sont venus détruire des sanctuaires musulmans. Donc ça a été donc le plus douloureux dans cette destruction du patrimoine de Tombouctou. Donc le reconstruire, il fallait donc beaucoup de tact, il fallait beaucoup d'esprit, beaucoup de flegme pour pouvoir donc ramener donc les esprits. Je vous donne un exemple palpable. Donc à l'orée de la reconstruction, vous savez, il y a une idée qui circule dans beaucoup de pays musulmans, surtout au Sahel, où on dit les non-musulmans n'ont pas le droit de visiter donc les mosquées. Donc c'est une idée qui a été encore plus étendue avec l'arrivée donc des islamistes armés à Tombouctou. Alors la première activité, quand j'ai été nommé en 2013 pour le programme de reconstruction de ce patrimoine bâti, ma première activité, c'est que j'ai réuni la notabilité, j'ai réuni les imams, les corps de métier, les anciens, en un atelier avec un ancien ministre venu de Bamako pour discuter de ces paramètres-là. Donc ce ministre-là a exposé, qui a été aussi ambassadeur du Mali en Iran, a exposé les tenants, les aboutissants de l'islam face au patrimoine mondial. Et à la fin, on a posé cette question, on leur a dit, mais est-ce qu'un non-musulman a le droit de visiter une mosquée ou un mausolée? On a posé cette question à tous ces imams, ces cadis. Et alors, il y a un des plus grands juristes de Tombouctou qui doit même venir à Tombouctou la semaine dernière, à Paris la semaine passée pour un atelier de calligraphie, mais qui n'a pas pu venir. Et lui, il s'est levé, il a posé cette question. Il a renvoyé cette question au modérateur. Il a dit, mais comment peut-on savoir que quelqu'un est musulman? Pour lui empêcher de visiter une mosquée ou un mausolée, est-ce que c'est la coloration de sa peau? Est-ce que son apparence physique? C'est quoi alors? Si c'est ça, il y a des musulmans partout. Donc il dit que cette question n'a pas lieu d'être. Donc beaucoup ont renchéri dans sa direction. Donc ça, c'était des exercices qui permettent aux gens de faire des discours de contre-narration pour pouvoir exorciser les démons de l'intolérance, parce que Tombouctou, c'est une ville connue pour sa tolérance, pour sa très grande mixité, pour donc, le brassage donc, entre les populations. Donc pour me résumer, donc, en gros, je dirais que le programme de reconstruction, c'est ça, c'est d'abord permettre aux différentes communautés qui sont là, non seulement professionnelles, ethniques, confessionnelles, de se retrouver, de discuter et d'exorciser de leur cœur et de leurs esprits le démon de l'intégrisme. Merci.
Merci beaucoup. Donc, vous avez parlé beaucoup de l'importance de la participation des communautés, de l'importance de tact et aussi de diplomatie. So now moving back to the cultural diplomacy dimension, I'd like to ask Ms. Palmer, how you feel the framework, UNESCO's framework of culture conventions can be used as a tool of cultural diplomacy, in particular on issues that sometimes may be sensitive, like illicit trafficking, return and restitution. So what is your experience coming from the Caribbean?
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. The Caribbean, Jamaica and the Caribbean tends not to see the battles between states that we've been hearing about, but within our own states, we've been seeing increasing violence, increasing situations that in quite a bit few circumstances we're not always prepared for. We've been recognizing that we've seen in recent times, the battles within our own countries. You know, for example, in Trinidad, where there was a coup at the Red House, government house. In Jamaica, where we would have had the West Kingston incursions. In Grenada, where there was the Maurice Bishop coup. And so coming out of those situations, and I can't speak without mentioning the current situation that we see playing out with Haiti. And we see in those circumstances how the necessity of our countries speaking internally, what we need to begin to engage in relation to diplomacy, cultural diplomacy between, usually between warring communities or, you know, the views of one versus another. What we've experienced is that we, as small island states, we need to, one, get our voices heard on these matters. And for us, that is representing, you know, becoming signatories to these conventions. And, you know, within the Caribbean, we're signatories to the conventions for World Heritage, illicit trafficking, a small number. We're signatories for ICH, cultural diversity, but we realize we are not as prepared as we need to be. And so one of the things that we've seen is the need to develop a greater understanding of what this means, you know, within even our governments. As a government representative myself, the understanding that there is a convention that deals with armed conflict, you know, why do we, you know, we're safe, we're good. But, you know, we would have all said that at one point until. And so what we found is that we've had to develop a new understanding across government, across our countries, of what this could mean for us. We need to prepare. And we are in a place where we're not prepared. And so, for example, within our one example is what we've seen is, for example, in Trinidad, where we've seen the host, the government host that would have been the source, the location for a coup, also becoming a place of dialogue, not only of governments, but certainly with even First Peoples, with excavations showing a large archaeological site. And so what that did was bring to the fore some of the issues that are in play with First Peoples in Trinidad, that where they would not have had a voice before, they were now allowed to come to the fore. They were allowed to give voice to the issues that they once didn't have a voice to bring to the fore before. And so we look at issues like that. We look at the fact that we need to begin to develop our policies, our legislation. In Jamaica right now, we're aiming to change our cultural legislation. And that is actually a direct push from the conventions we've been working on, because we realize how far behind we've been on that. Some of the work that we've also been seeing is the use of culture to bring peace. You know, Jamaicans are very big on sports, for example. And football, as simple as you take it, football has been something that we've used in warring communities to bring peace. And murals in our downtown area of Kingston where in communities you could never walk in these spaces. Now we've introduced cultural heritage in such a way that the communities themselves are the ones doing the murals, and people are able to come and view the spaces. So we're realizing we need to develop policies, we need to develop our legislation in such a way that we can engage people at a level that they've not really been engaged before. I think
Thank you
that's
so much. Thanks for flagging also the importance of preparedness. Dear panelists, I realize that we are running out of time, so rather than me asking you a second round of questions, I would propose that I give each of you 1 minute to quickly respond or put forward any recommendation as regards how we can better make sure that culture is integrated in humanitarian, peace building, peace maintenance. So any recommendation or any reaction? And then I hope we will also have a couple of minutes for some comments and quick questions from the floor. Omar, can I ask you to start?
Okay, the key to the recovery of Mosul's heritage was, and also for preventing violent extremism, is that once again heritage was made visible after it was invisible for decades. I think more interaction between government, legislators, grassroots communities, and international organizations like UNESCO, but also paying more attention to the continuity of cultural heritage, that it evolves over time. Its purpose and its function is not the same today. It's going to evolve with next generations. So I think we also need to adapt to new needs for people and their relation and connection with cultural heritage to make it more visible. Yes, it is a target, but also making it more visible puts more responsibility on the people so they act more responsibly in the future protection of cultural heritage.
Thank you. Aman, please.
Bosnian case is a success story. How, through joint work of cultural diplomacy, integrating cultural heritage into the peace accords, because International Peace Accord for Bosnia, known as the Dayton Peace Accord, integrated cultural heritage as one of 11 paramount factors of peace building, and also work with community and participatory reconstruction, participation of the community in reconstruction, understanding the needs, can become a healing process. So what we can say, what we have learned in these 70 years, if anything, 70 years of implementing Hague Convention, what has changed? I think it can be derived from the nexus between people and heritage, and that's what these recent conflicts teach us. We no longer observe cultural heritage as a subject, either of destruction or recovery of society. It is rather an agent of social processes in both contexts, in war and after the war. So the centrality shift from object to humans should be considered in the process of bringing Hague Convention to the effective life in our time.
Thank you so much. Alexandra?
I am looking forward to more ratifications of the 1954 Convention and its protocols, but the Convention does not stand on its own, and the Geneva Conventions on the law of the war do not stand on humanitarian law, do not stand on their own. They're part of a wider system. And all these instruments have to be interpreted in the light of obligations about non-discrimination in ensuring the right to culture, participation of individuals and groups in deciding what is their cultural heritage. It is not up to the state, it is up to the individuals and the groups to decide what is important to be saved and most important to be saved. and also living heritage. So heritage, the way it is interpreted at the moment in a dynamic way by international law. International law does not mean that we pick and choose, we pick one convention, but we interpret all the conventions in the light of that. Also, of course, indigenous rights, free, prior, and informed consent of indigenous peoples, etc. So what I would like to see is, first of all, creating space, like what we've been creating in the Committee of the Second Protocol to the Hague Convention, creating space for cultural rights and other human rights, but certainly cultural rights, but also states creating space and educating their military, their judges, their advocates, their politicians, that we're not going to start reinventing the wheel, and we're not going to have to learn only about the 4 Geneva Protocols and the 1954 Convention, but we have to know very well how to interpret these instruments in the light of human rights obligations that the state has.
Thank you very much. Katarina?
I would recall for more emphasis on partnerships, on communities of practice. The European Union being a group of 27 for the moment and more to come, hopefully not to leave, even after the elections. We are well placed to foster cooperation between regions. So what I take home from here is definitely to look at our dialogues with African Union, with ASEAN, and other key partners, and how we can integrate cultural heritage in those dialogues. I also would like to emphasize the importance of communities of practice, and I do think that the participants to this conference already form such a community of practice, where we should welcome new members of the community of practice and be ready to share our experiences and lessons identified. For example, this morning I was listening to our friend, colleague from UNESCO, concerning practical guidelines of training of armed forces. This immediately prompted me to think, okay, do we have already in the European Union such guidelines for training of our CSDP, civilian and military staff? That's another lesson I will take home to check. And final point, I would encourage us to look cross-sector. We have strong policies already on issues such as youth peace and security, women peace and security, climate change, environmental degradation, peace and security. Let's also look across those and other policies, how we can bridge our efforts and ensure greater synergies. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Monsieur El Boukari?
Merci beaucoup. Je pense que ce qui est surtout important, c'est qu'il faut savoir que chaque site a ses spécificités. Donc, c'est très différent d'un site à l'autre. Parce que, par exemple, je donne le cas de Tombouctou et même du Mali en général. C'est généralement des sites culturels, mais les communautés qui sont en première ligne pour la gestion du site, ils voient ça comme des sites cultuels, c'est-à-dire des sites destinés à la pratique du culte. Donc il faut faire en sorte que le programme de reconstruction, même, je pense que même la destruction de ces sites par les islamistes armés, ça a été une opportunité pour enlever ça de la tête des communautés. Pourquoi? Parce qu'il y a des gens dits musulmans qui sont venus détruire ces sites, et ceux qui sont venus les restaurer, les reconstruire, généralement, c'est des non-musulmans. Donc les communautés se sont posées la question, pourquoi des Français, des Hollandais, des Italiens, des Américains s'intéressent à des mosquées, à des mausolées? On leur a dit non, c'est pas parce que c'est des mosquées, ces mausolées ne vous appartiennent pas, ça appartient au monde entier. Donc je pense qu'il faut aller vers l'utilisation d'outils pédagogiques pour que les communautés puissent comprendre. Le directeur national du patrimoine culturel du Mali est là. Il m'a dit que son plus grand rêve, c'est de pouvoir inscrire d'autres sites du Mali. Et il y en a des dizaines qui potentiellement valent sur les 4 qui sont inscrits. Et il me dit que le manque de moyens criard, ça l'empêche de faire ça. Le directeur national du patrimoine du Sénégal est aussi là, dans la salle, et il me dit aussi que son plus grand souci, c'est de pouvoir intégrer les outils numériques, informatiques, pour la gestion du site, parce que c'est extrêmement important. Donc il y a un idéologue russe qui dit que le plus grand moyen, la meilleure façon de célébrer un anniversaire, c'est de rappeler ce qui n'a pas été fait. Donc, ce qui reste à faire. Et je pense que ces deux choses-là, il faut absolument donc les faire. Donc, il faut plus d'outils pédagogiques parce que chez nous, c'est les communautés locales qui sont en première ligne pour la conservation du patrimoine. Il faut souvent les amadouer pour faire telle ou telle action.
Merci.
Donc, et il y a énormément de patrimoine, de sites classés. Faute de moyens, ces sites-là meurent. Donc, il y a ça. Donc, je vous remercie. Voilà.
Merci beaucoup. Miss Palmer.
For the Caribbean, while we do see the increasing threat of violence, our most present threat is the vulnerabilities that we have from hurricanes, from earthquakes, and more recently from volcanoes. And for us, the threat brings us into the reality that we need to work together to build out our strategies, to develop our inventories, to digitize our collections. Most of our collections are located on the coast of our island, and so we've seen the loss of many of our countries, the heritage of many of our countries, to the impact of stronger and stronger hurricanes, strong earthquakes. And as we spoke about, just briefly about Haiti, we saw just the increasing threat to cultural heritage coming from a 2001 earthquake, a 2010 earthquake, and then gang violence that has prevented the country from engaging heritage in the way they want to. And so what we are looking to do is, as I said, change our legislation, address our policies, working together with our Caribbean associations. Recently, we had the launch of the Cultural Heritage Emergency Hub in the Caribbean, and that is a major thrust for us to not only provide help for in our own countries, but for the rest of the region, building our capacities, enabling us to help ourselves. So I think for us in the Caribbean, we definitely are in the preparation mode to protect ourselves.
Thank you so much. I believe the panel deserves a round of applause. Thank you so much. Perhaps we can take one or two quick responses, comments, reactions before we break for lunch. Is there anybody who feels? Yes, we see a hand up there. Yes, it's coming.
Thank you. Merci beaucoup. Je suis José Kirps, la présidente du Conseil international des archives, ICA, International Council on Archives. Donc ce matin, nous avons entendu, on a parlé de beaucoup d'initiatives. Il y a les forces militaires, il y a l'UNESCO, il y a Blue Shield, il y a l'Union européenne. Je sais que le Conseil international des archives est très actif aussi dans certaines régions, mais plus spécialement concentré sur les archives. Donc la question que je me pose ou que je pose aux personnes présentes sur le podium, est-ce qu'il n'y a pas un danger de chevauchement de certaines initiatives? Est-ce que ça ne risque pas parfois d'être contre-productif le fait que beaucoup d'initiatives soient lancées sur le même territoire? Donc, c'est ma question donc de savoir comment coordonner ces différentes initiatives pour qu'on ait le meilleur résultat possible. Merci.
Merci beaucoup. Il y a une autre question ici. Could you bring the microphone here, please?
Merci beaucoup, Christa. Je suis Joël Iparamutema, je suis coordinateur du comité consultatif national qui s'occupe de la protection des biens culturels en cas de conflits armés en République démocratique du Congo. J'ai retenu un concept qui a été développé ce matin et il y a quelques minutes sur les inventaires, parce que nous avons considéré, et l'on considère au niveau des experts, qu'on ne peut protéger que si l'on connaît la valeur de ces biens. Et le cas de la République démocratique du Congo, pour l'instant, nous travaillons avec l'accompagnement de l'ICOMOS sur les inventaires et on met en place des comités scientifiques pour préparer le professionnel à la collecte et donc à réaliser ces inventaires. Mais je prends la parole surtout pour le cas du Mali. Et je constate qu'il y a de belles choses qui se passent au Mali, mais que le reste de l'Afrique n'en bénéficie pas. Et je pense qu'il y a peut-être un petit problème de réseautage en termes donc, de collaboration pour le partage d'expériences. Et ça serait important que le secrétariat de la Convention ainsi que les autres structures associées accompagnent les États africains. Surtout, nous avons le même problème. La RDC, le Mali, l'Irak, l'Ukraine. On a les mêmes problèmes de guerre. Donc, je pense qu'il y a moyen de voir comment vous pouvez nous aider à nous mettre ensemble pour qu'il y ait partage d'expériences en vue donc de sécuriser durablement le patrimoine culturel. Merci.
Merci. Il y avait une autre main là. So let's take the last question from there and then we can wrap up.
Thank you very much. I want to thank all the speakers for the wonderful elucidation. I am from the Gambia. I work as a culture desk officer at the National Commission for UNESCO, but I also serve as the ASP.NET National Coordinator. I want to hear the versions from the various speakers, what they think, because I believe that culture is a signage into the future. It connects us, the present and the past. I want to know what their various experiences have been as far as working with the youth are concerned when it comes to rebuilding monuments and the like. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me then turn quickly to the panel if there are any reactions. I can then perhaps also compliment on behalf of UNESCO. Yes, Amram.
Thank you for all these questions. I will just briefly answer to the one concerning the coordination, necessary coordination of the activities. We in Bosnia were faced with the chaos of everyone who wanted to help us. The coordination is needed, but the ownership is extremely important. Who owns the outcome of this support and aid? And it should be the community, the people who are affected by disaster. And it's also extremely important to build sustainability and resilience through this aid. And this sustainability and resilience is built through the capacity building and also through the work with youth. And that brings me to reflecting to your question that is extremely important. Working with youth, from children in the primary schools, developing different kind of campaigns, raising awareness and the knowledge about the power of heritage to connect us, to have this healing power of trauma. A lot of children are now, we know that about Ukraine and Gaza right now, while the drums of the war are heard here, we can hear them. They are, in fact, exposed to different kind of psychological problems. And cultural heritage is a powerful tool to heal this trauma, to heal individual psychological. We in Bosnia, we in my institution, that has been established through the support, general support of the Dutch government. Former Minister Jan Pronk, in fact, was the leading person in giving this support. And my organization that I am representing here was established in 1997 to work as some kind of a glue in the society that was totally war-torn. And we have succeeded, and one of our flagship projects is working with the global youth and using the lessons from Bosnia in post-war recovery, participatory recovery, inclusive heritage reconstruction, as a tool of peace building and as a tool of healing trauma. And that project is called International Summer School Youth and Heritage. This year we have 19th edition, and we do that in cooperation with ICROM, Arab Regional Center for World Heritage, German Technical University for the UNESCO Chair for Sustainable Management of Cultural Heritage from Muscat, and also Cambridge University. So this is a huge project. The participants come from, we had 5 participants from Mosul that found it as some kind of a giving hope to them, bringing the image of the future of Mosul. We had people from Ukraine and from the other war-affected young people, youth, coming to Bosnia to see how the future of these war-torn societies might look if the careful restoration of heritage is put in the center of post-war recovery.
Thank you, Alexandra.
Thank you so much. And I am treating this now as an invitation for an official visit to Congo of my mandate. Because usually what happens is that, we are, as special rapporteurs, struggling to find states that will commit to official visits. We would love to help you. And we are helping at the moment a state with, having a collaboration of states, having a declaration on cultural heritage. We are viewing and revising and reviewing training handbooks on cultural heritage to see whether they incorporate cultural rights. We are working with governments to see whether the various initiatives do take into account the most vulnerable rather than, the usual suspects. And I think that there is an issue with that indeed when it comes to youth, etc. And we're hoping to work with the EU of taking a more bottom-up approach when it comes to the protection incorporating international human rights law also in the in all of its handbooks and fantastic policies. So we're here and we're open. We're just waiting for you to come to help you. Please use us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Katarina, 1 minute, please.
Alexandra, when you go to your visit, please go to visit also the European Union delegation there. I will facilitate your visit. Juste une petite remarque sur la question de coordination de mon temps sur le terrain au Burkina Faso, Rwanda, etc. Je pense vraiment les autorités nationales qui doivent jouer un rôle très important dedans. En fait, nous, en tant que, je mets entre parenthèses, bailleurs de fonds, on a un peu la tendance de vouloir le faire nous-mêmes. Hein. Et très rapidement, on heurte à des limitations, à des limites à ce que nous, on peut faire. Et en fait, je pense que ce n'est pas notre tâche. Je pense vraiment, j'encourage tous les pays qui ont des plans de travail, des plans d'action sur la protection de héritage culturel ou autre, aussi de prévoir la question de coordination des dons. Donc, qui fait quoi? Et en fait, voilà, c'est pas très compliqué, mais je pense que vous pointez au doigt quand même un défi qui est là et qui est réel sur le terrain. Et là, je vois le rôle des autorités nationales et aussi, bien sûr, au niveau local ou au niveau de communauté, si possible, à travers les plans d'action qui incluent toujours la question de qui fait quoi. Voilà.
Thank you very much, Katarina. Ladies and gentlemen, let me also, on behalf of UNESCO, thank you all. First of all, the panelists, but also you for being here, for participating. I think what one of the takeaways for me from this session is also the importance for us to work together. for the different stakeholders to come together and make a contribution. And that's why I'm also happy to look at the prospect of working within the civil-military alliance that UNESCO has launched on the occasion of the 70th anniversary of the Hague Convention, which I believe will be a platform for us to actually bring together military and civil partners, learn from each other, share best practices, and make sure that the cultural property of humankind is well protected. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Krista, and Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear participants. This plenary session has now ended.
Et nous vous invitons à participer à une agora organisée par l'UNESCO et ses partenaires. Et à cette occasion, je tiens à vous informer qu'il y a une pièce d'archives unique exposée à l'espace de l'UNESCO. C'est la première liste de l'UNESCO avec le registre international des biens culturels sous protection spéciale, avec l'enregistrement du premier site en 1960. N'hésitez pas à le visualiser, mais sans le toucher.